Step away from my charger, Marlene. That's the first thing out of my mouth as I yank the blinds open at 2:17 in the morning, adrenaline spiking so hard it rattles my teeth. There she is, our self-appointed queen of cul-de-sac compliance, squatting in my driveway like a raccoon with a clipboard. The glow from the street lamp catches the shine of her acrylic nails as she tugs at my EV cord. My heart hammers against the glass. I wasn't dreaming. My HOA president really is stealing electricity. You'd think I lived in some crime-riddled city, but no. This is Cedar Pines Estates, a master-planned neighborhood that sells itself on peaceful luxury living, and a glossy brochure photo of Marlene herself shaking hands at the ribbon cutting. If you asked her, she runs this place like it's a country club. If you asked anyone else, well, let's just say more than a few neighbors have practiced voodoo on their HOA fine notices. The thing about Cedar Pines is everything has rules. Fences can't be taller than 4 feet. Seasonal decor must be removed within 7 days of the holiday. And according to the latest bulletin stuffed into our mailboxes, written in Marlene's beloved Comic Sans EV chargers, must be pre-approved by the board. The board, of course, is Marlene. The bylaw doesn't specify brand, installation type, or even safety. It's simply her excuse to nose around properties like she's the sheriff of suburbia. So when my charger started mysteriously disconnecting at night, I figured it was another one of her games. What I didn't expect was to catch her red-handed. Clipboard tucked under her arm, she bent low, muttering something about community hazards while tugging on my charging cable, and when the connector popped free with a metallic click, I saw her smirk, like she'd just confiscated contraband. I slid my window open just an inch, enough for her to hear me. "Funny," I whispered. "Last I checked, trespassing wasn't in the bylaws." Her head snapped up, lips pressed so tight her lipstick line looked like a fresh paper cut. "This is unauthorized equipment," she hissed. "Against community regulations. I'll be issuing a violation." "Unauthorized?" I almost laughed. "Pretty sure it's plugged into my house, not the HOA clubhouse." She straightened, brushing off imaginary dust from her blazer even though she was still crouched like a burglar. "Your charger is a danger to property values. And I've had reports, serious reports, that you've been drawing more than your share of community power." Now, here's where my jaw dropped. Because community power? That doesn't exist. We all have separate meters, separate bills, separate everything. But suddenly, the puzzle pieces slid into place. Neighbors whispering about Marlene's son's new Tesla, the extension cord I spotted running from her garage last week, the mystery surges people mentioned at the last HOA meeting. I leaned farther out the window, lowering my voice. "You're not unplugging me. You're plugging yourself in." Her face went pale under the lamplight, the way only a guilty person's face can. She recovered quickly. Of course, Karen presidents always do, but the flash of panic was enough. "That's a ridiculous accusation," she spat, tightening her grip on the clipboard. "If you weren't so defensive, maybe you'd consider how unsafe." But she didn't get to finish because just then, the sound cut the night air. The unmistakable soft whir of an EV charging up. Only it wasn't mine. It was coming from 2 driveways over, from her precious son's Tesla, parked and quietly guzzling electricity like a suburban vampire. I swear, if my window hadn't been between us, I might have pointed at it like a cartoon detective. "There's your report," I said, "and guess what? I didn't file it." Her eyes flicked to the Tesla, then back to me, panic threatening to bubble up again. But she slapped it down with the kind of confidence only an HOA president can fake. "You'll regret this," she whispered and marched back toward her house, neon clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. The night air was damp, thick with the scent of watered lawns and blooming jasmine. I stood there, window open, barely breathing, trying to decide if I should laugh or lock every door in the house. Because here's the truth. You can fight a thief. You can fight a liar. But fighting an HOA president? That's a war. And Marlene wasn't the type to lose. The next morning, I found the first shot across the bow. a bright yellow violation notice fluttering on my door, citing me for improper exterior equipment installation. She didn't even have the decency to slide it in the mailbox. It was taped to the glass, dead center, like a scarlet letter. My neighbors slowed their morning jogs to gawk. One even gave me the kind of pity nod reserved for people who leave trash cans out too long. But here's what Marlene didn't know. I wasn't about to roll over. Not after catching her with her hand literally on my charger. Not after years of watching her weaponize bylaws for her personal vendettas. She had escalated, and if she thought a yellow slip of paper was enough to scare me off, she was sorely mistaken. That night I stood in my driveway, charger plugged in, daring her to try again. The air was heavy with sprinkler mist, the glow from my porch light cutting a perfect circle around the charger. Every hum, every click, every soft buzz of electricity made me twitch. I waited, knowing she couldn't resist, knowing her greed and her obsession with control would drag her back. And when I finally heard the faint crunch of her kitten heels on the pavement, my pulse quickened. This time, I was ready. "Marlene, you might want to check the mirror, your face is glowing." The words slipped out before I could stop them. She froze in my driveway, dripping neon pink from hairline to blazer, looking less like an HOA president and more like a paintball casualty. The powder clung to every crease, every fold, streaking down her neck in uneven rivulets. For one delicious second, the queen bee of Cedar Pines Estates had been dethroned by a dollar store dye pack, and my motion sensor camera caught it all in glorious 1080p. If you'd told me last week that I'd be rigging up booby traps in my garage, I would have laughed. But when you live under Marlene's reign, you learn survival. After she slipped that violation notice onto my door like a curse, I knew it wasn't over. This wasn't just about my charger anymore. It was about control. And the only way to beat a control freak is to make sure they can't control the narrative. So I built a snare. Nothing dangerous, just humiliating. I set a decoy charger in the exact same spot, wires coiled across the garage floor like snakes ready to strike. Inside the housing, I tucked a powder pack I'd modified with a little food dye. A tripwire of fishing line led to a motion sensor, linked to a camera mounted in plain sight. Not hidden, not subtle. If she bothered to look, she'd see the blinking red light. But Marlene, she never saw traps, she only saw opportunities. The bait worked faster than I expected. At precisely 11:43 p.m., I heard the squeak of her kitten heels on concrete. My heart raced as the motion alert pinged my phone. I swiped the screen, and there she was, blazer-buttoned, hair shellacked, clipboard at her side like a sword. She strutted into my garage without hesitation, muttering to herself about safety hazards and violations pending. Then she grabbed the decoy charger handle. The powder burst with a hiss, a perfect arc of pink cloud that engulfed her face and shoulders. She gasped, stumbled back, and sneezed, smearing streaks across her own cheeks. The camera captured it all. The flailing arms, the squeals, the neon dust settling into her primly styled bun. For someone who claimed to be protecting property values, she now looked like a discount flamingo. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. By sunrise, screenshots of the footage had already leaked into the neighborhood group chat. I didn't share it, someone else did. Probably one of the folks tired of her surprise inspections and yard-measuring crusades. The captions were merciless. Pink Lady Patrol. Sherwin-Williams' new spokesmodel. Marlene's makeover. Half the neighborhood laughed until their coffee came out their noses. The other half sent nervous emojis, terrified of the fallout. Because here's the thing, Marlene thrived on intimidation. She'd fined people for hanging hummingbird feeders, for leaving trash bins visible for 3 minutes too long, even for excessive seasonal cheer when the Johnsons left their Christmas lights up until January 3rd. Now she wasn't the enforcer. She was the joke. Of course, she didn't take it quietly. By noon, another violation notice was taped to my door. This one so aggressive it nearly tore the paint when I peeled it off. Harassment of HOA officials, it read. endangerment of community safety. She even underlined endangerment twice in red pen, as if I'd set off a landmine instead of a food dye pack. I called her bluff. "Funny," I told her when she stormed up to my porch in full powder-stained regalia. "I don't recall any bylaw about booby traps in my own garage. Care to cite the section?" Her nostrils flared, powder still clinging to the fine lines around her eyes. "You've humiliated this board," she snapped. "You've humiliated me." I smiled. "No, Marlene, you did that to yourself." Neighbors slowed their dog walks just to watch the showdown. One guy even whispered, "Popcorn, worthy," under his breath. The more she ranted, the more pink dust puffed off her blazer, drifting like smoke in the autumn sunlight. She looked like a derailed circus act, and the audience was eating it up. But, as satisfying as it was, I knew better than to celebrate too early. Because a humiliated HOA president isn't defeated. She's dangerous. That night, my phone buzzed with another alert from the motion camera. This time, though, it wasn't Marlene. It was two board members, skulking around my driveway with flashlights, whispering like kids dared to ring a doorbell. They didn't touch the charger. They just pointed, scribbled notes, and left. But the message was clear. Marlene was rallying her troops. And when the official HOA email arrived in my inbox the next morning, subject line bolded in all caps, "Emergency Board Meeting, Homeowner Safety Concerns." My stomach sank. The war wasn't over. It was just getting started. My trap was my property, Marlene, and you signed the clause that says you can't touch it. The look on her face was priceless, somewhere between a tomato and a stop sign, streaks of dried pink powder framing her jaw like war paint. She pounded on my door so hard the glass rattled in its frame, screeching about community vandalism, as if she hadn't been the one caught red-handed. Behind her, a couple of neighbors had already gathered, phones out, recording the HOA president's late-night meltdown. For the first time in years, she wasn't feared. She was spectacle. I'll admit I was shaking. It's one thing to rig a prank. It's another to have the HOA president still half covered in dye trying to blow your door off its hinges at 7 in the morning. My coffee sat untouched on the counter, steam curling in the air while I decided whether to call the police or just call her bluff. I chose the bluff. "Vandalism," I said, cracking the door just wide enough. "That's funny, because my camera shows you trespassing. With intent." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "The board will fine you for this. Count on it." And that was her fatal mistake. Because the one thing Marlene loved more than wielding bylaws was forgetting she'd actually written them. The emergency board meeting was scheduled the next evening, but Cedar Pine's gossip works faster than Wi-Fi. By the time I arrived at the clubhouse, half the neighborhood was already crammed inside, whispering and craning their necks. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and air freshener, with a sharper edge of tension underneath. Marlene sat at the head of the table in her usual blazer, dry-cleaned but still faintly tinted pink under the fluorescent lights. She tried to look composed, but the corner of her left eye twitched every time someone's phone buzzed with another next-door notification. The meeting began with her voice, sharp and theatrical. "We are here to address a serious threat to the safety of our community. A homeowner has engaged in reckless, dangerous behavior that undermines trust and endangers property values." She didn't even look at her notes. This was her courtroom moment, her trial of the century. "Care to specify the behavior?" I asked, projecting my voice just enough for the crowd. She slapped the table. "Booby traps. He installed an illegal device meant to cause harm." "Correction," I cut in, holding up the thick, laminated binder of HOA bylaws she loved so dearly. Section 14, Subsection C. Tampering with personal property belonging to another homeowner constitutes a violation subject to fines or removal from office. Your signature, bottom of the page. The binder hit the table with a satisfying thud. A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. Even her most loyal allies leaned forward, suddenly very interested in the fine print. For a split second, she faltered. The mask slipped. Then she doubled down. This is absurd. He's twisting the rules to... I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The projector at the front of the room flickered to life, and there it was. The video. Marlene, creeping into my garage. Marlene, tugging at the charger. Marlene, caught in a perfect explosion of neon powder, flailing like a flamingo in quicksand. The room erupted. Some tried to stifle laughs behind their hands, others didn't bother. The Johnsons in the back nearly fell off their chairs. And somewhere in the middle, a board member actually muttered, "Well, that explains the group chat." Her face went redder than the powder ever managed. "This is harassment," she barked. "This is character assassination." "No, Marlene," I said calmly. "This is evidence. Evidence that you tampered with my charger, my property, and you embarrassed this entire association when you got caught. That wasn't me. That was you." The mini-climax came fast. The board huddled together at the far end of the table, whispering furiously. The audience leaned forward, hungry. Finally, the treasurer cleared his throat. "Per the bylaws, and considering the evidence presented, the board votes to remove Marlene as president of Cedar Pines Estates, effective immediately." You could feel the air shift. Relief, disbelief, a little giddy joy. Neighbors glanced at each other like kids in class after a strict teacher finally got fired. Marlene, however, sat frozen, jaw clenched so tightly I thought her teeth might crack. "This isn't over," she whispered, her voice low but carrying. "You think you've won, but you've humiliated me in front of my community, and I don't forgive humiliation." She gathered her pink-streaked blazer around her shoulders like a cape and stormed out, heels clicking with the finality of a gavel. The room buzzed with whispers and muffled laughter, but I barely heard them. Because I knew Marlene too well. A dethroned HOA president doesn't vanish. She lingers. She plots. And as the projector screen went black and my phone buzzed with another next-door alert, I realized the real battle wasn't finished. It was just moving off the record.